G'day everyone and welcome back to the shed. Today I'm going to put a piece into my Kingswood door, which is this rusty piece down here is coming out, and the nice new piece I have previously made is going in. Now this is a bit of 1.2mm thick material which matches the frame, so that would be 18 gauge from memory. I've made it pretty much how the original was. I've got a little drain set up in here that's very close to what the original was. Now I like to make these pieces look as close to original as possible, so when you look in there it's sort of got a chopped edge there. How I went about this was to make the little depression in the panel on this corner in here with no opening in it for the water to go through, and then I used my favourite sharpened up screwdriver that I use for knocking seals out of things, and it's got a sharp edge on it. So then it was just a case of sitting the new piece on the edge of the vise, lining the edge of the vise jaw up with where I wanted to chop it through, and then give it 2 or 3 taps with the hammer. Didn't have to hit it hard, and it just fractured it. Then I was able to drive this through the hole, lever it around, hammer around each side of it, and I got the same shape roughly as what Holden had. Now once I had the basic shape folded, naturally this corner wasn't in it and this shape here wasn't in it, I cut it back far enough to where the straight line ends and it starts to wrap around the front of the door, and I've taken out the old drain section on the door frame to give myself a bit of clearance in here, and I was able to sit it all together, form this wrap around here, and then roll this piece in here, and then it was just a case of cutting a little triangle of material and welding that in, so that all works. So now I want to put this into the door, but I don't want the door to change shape. So I'm going to just weld a piece of material along the edge of the door, just along somewhere in there anyway, and what we'll do is we'll pre-cut where the edge of the new piece is going to go up into the frame a bit here. Not enough that it's going to affect the strength of the door and have it change shape, but enough room that I can get the little recip saw in there and cut the piece up afterwards once I've got my bit of material in place. So naturally, if we jump in and think, got to have a brace, better weld something on there, and we put it on the door, and then we find we can't cut the old piece out because we've got the brace in the way. So always think a couple of steps ahead and it'll go much better. Now, the reason I'm bracing this is once we start welding this in here, we'll have a little bit of shrinkage on the weld, and if left loose to do its own thing, we could easily wind up with the door having a little bit of a change in shape along the bottom. And I've seen this on cars out in the field where you can look along there, sight along the line of the rocker panel, and there's the bottom of the door doing its own thing where it's had a repair in the frame underneath it. So if in doubt, add a brace every time. Now for everybody out there who's new to the channel, and this happens to be the first video of ours you've watched, this is a door that we're repairing that was on the cusp of being something you'd throw away. It really was in poor shape. There was a big section in here where someone had hacked a hole in it for a radio speaker. They'd done it with an air chisel. They'd done a lot of damage to it. It was rusty pretty much everywhere. So this is not a typical repair. I probably wouldn't have gone ahead with this door had it not been for YouTube. It would have just been one of the ones I'd throw in the corner in case I needed it if I was desperate one day. So to get it back to being reasonable, I've replaced it with a section of a second-hand door that was also very rusty, so that section has got a patch in it. We've made the patch in previous videos, we've installed it in the door now, and now we're just building up to get the last of the frame finished before we weld a skin together and put on there. But once that's done, I also want to pull the skin completely off the door, and then we'll look at that as well and put the skin back on the door, as just as a little how-to sort of build with that as well. So we'll get that cut. We can get some of the rubbish out the way, we'll get our brace in, and then we're into actually chopping it out and then making our replacement section fit properly and welding it in. So I just clamped it in place, and I'm going to put a few spots of weld on. I always prefer to weld a brace on even if it's clamped, just in case it wants to walk and carry on a bit, because we're going to have to separate some spot welds here. We've got to hammer it a bit and things like that, so we want to be sure it's going to stay where it is. I've also got to replace this little strip down the edge of the door. There's actually a few pinholes in it, but because it's pitted on the other side, if I welded up the pinholes, the moisture would sit in the rust pits. So we'll replace that entirely. So I can get a very good weld on this corner here, and it won't matter because I'm going to cut this piece off anyway eventually. The other ends and end we've already repaired. That's on a previous video. So I want to put enough weld that it's going to stay there, but I've got to be able to separate it again easily. So I might just put a bead along this edge just in here, and I can cut that with the edge of the cutting wheel. And the same thing here where we're separating our piece. I'll get a little bit of weld in next to the clamp there as well, just on this edge here. And then it's an easy thing to just run the cutting wheel along there and take the weld off and have it come apart again. So we'll spot it, and then we'll start cutting our piece out, and then we're just going to trim the new bit to fit. And I'll just do a bit on the end of this one underneath. Really easy stuff here. If it's not easy, you're not doing it right. So then you've got to step back, have a look and see what's going wrong with it and proceed from there. So the door is now braced. We could take the clamps off. I'm going to leave them here for now. We'll probably take them off and put them back on as we're going, as we need room. But the more support you got, the better it's going to work. So I'm going to cut this one up to the line here, just where our new panel comes in there. There's a couple of spot welds. There's one there, one down there. I'll drill them. We'll get this piece out the way, and there's naturally going to be a bit of rust on that overlap that we'll have to clean up and treat, maybe even give it a quick blast, but we'll just see how bad it is. If it's really bad, we can just cut that piece out and put a new piece of material in there and weld that back and finish it as well, and we can do that with our brace already in place there, and we won't change any of the door dimensions. We've got a bit of rust down here. Now this will really benefit from a quick blast, I would say. It's a little bit too scaly to just be treating with a chemical treatment. A good wire brushing would work, a little bit of a grind and a wire brush. You'd get the rust out of the pits. We'll grind up the excess material here, and then we'll have a look at giving it a quick blast, and then we're ready to keep going with it. You can come in and have a look. What I'm going to do very quickly is just weld up those two little divots from the end of the drill. Because we're putting a different piece in there, and we'll just do a plug weld, there's no guarantee we're going to line up exactly on those two spots again. So if I weld them, grind them smooth, my new welds can be absolutely anywhere on the panel, it won't matter. And we've got a bit of area that we can work from. This one must have missed out at the factory, because usually they've got two of them in here. And I like to put two when I go back together, so usually I'll wind up with one weld in there, two on there, and then a couple in here, and then nothing on this face across here, and that's pretty solid and close to what the factory gave us. It's good to be back playing Kingswood Utes. Righto, eyes. Yeah, now I'm going to change tactic here. Too close to this edge. If the disc catches on this edge, it's going to grab and spit the disc out all over the place. So I'll just touch that with the belt sander and knock the top of that off. Now this one is a very good tool for all these sorts of jobs where you've got something that's not flat, a corner close to the edge of something. These little belt sanders will rip in there, linishing sand or whatever you want to call it, and clean up little lumps and bumps like this. It's not going to get all the rust gone though, so I will give it a blast though. I was just trying to cheat a little bit. That bit in there's come up so nice. I was just hoping that maybe the rust wasn't in that deep, but you can see the pits through where I've ground it. The rust would just sit in there, and even if we painted it and put it back together, we would wind up with a problem in the future. Blasted and painted, looking a whole lot happier. Put a little bit of weld through on the back of this piece, and here is where putting this support railing comes into its own, because once we sit this in here, it just automatically lines up. So I can clamp that there now. The only thing I've got to do to change in this top corner is, because where it overlaps, there's got to be a little bit of a step in our panel. So what I'm going to do is just crimp that in there with a pair of vice grips very quickly and very easily. So get you set in there, and we can put a little bit of scrap material there so we're not going to bruise our piece of material with our vice grip jaws. Clamp that down on the high side, stabilise that. Another little piece of scrap just where we want to squash it down. And if we put this in here, it should just crimp into place and be what we want. And look at that, it's pretty much done it. So if we look now, our piece just follows the rail and it steps up and on top of the overlap piece there. Got a little bit of a high spot there where I worked it past the drain. I can tap that out now, and I might just do that. It wouldn't matter, we could do it later on when we're getting ready for the skin. But if we've got it all sitting nice, I can mark the back of it for the excess off, and it'll all go well. So I'll give it a little bit of a tap, sort him out, and we'll mark all the back of it. And we just pretty much just trim it and put it in there. And that's pretty much straightened that up. Now it's the whole making a panel on top of the original sort of approach here. So if I get them clamped nicely into place, I can just get this corner to settle down where I want it to, and then we can mark the back of it, trim that excess, and it should just about drop straight into the same spot. So just shrinking this corner in a little bit here and down there, and as I was sort of hitting it, you can hear the noise change when it starts coming in and touching the panel behind it and getting into the shape we want it to be. And there's a little bit of a high spot in here. And the metal just shrinks around to where we want it. So I've got a little overlap around this corner in here, but I think I'll leave that for now, and I'll just get the scriber and run around the back of it and get our cut line sorted. Scribe line in there, and that's as far as I can get to, is this little piece in the corner. if we mark the outside of it where it comes through here, we should be able to get a line from this point on this side to the outside point there, and just cut it in a straight line, and we'll be close to where we want to be. Okay, that's our weld line will be in the middle there. So if we go with somewhere about there. Alrighty, we'll snip that piece off and see what we've got. I'll do my first cut and leave myself a bit of room, and then I'll come back and do a fine trim. Now that's looking pretty close. Yeah, we've got a little bit here, we're a bit high. I think in clamping it down, we're going to get that close to that point there. And then we've got this little bit of no man's land around here where I couldn't see what I was doing. But this piece actually comes down a little bit. Might just clean the back of that off. It's that close, I think I'll grind it to fit. So I'll cut this little piece off around the edge. So I can cut that through about there. Okay, you can take a little bit more off that end there. Another couple of millimetres anyway. Little by little, we'll get you to fit. Now I've got a rock in it here, so where I've shaped this new panel, it's got a little bit of a high spot in here that really wants shifting. But I'm thinking that if I can get it to fit, we can hammer it into place. So that is so close to being the right size. Okay. Might just hammer him down a bit. Scared it a bit anyway. Okay, now how much more do I want? Still think we want a little bit more out of there. Okay. Clamp it back into place, tap it back around, see what it wants to do. That's getting close to what we want. So we just want to relieve it a little bit between there and there.
I don't understand what you mean by relieve.
Take a piece of metal off. So we just open this little bit up in here and it should push into the corner at the bottom then, because we're allowing this to stand up a little bit taller this way and this edge here to tuck in a bit more. So the rest of it pretty much fits into the hole. I've got a little bit of a high spot just there. I can trim that off too. Okay, I think that will pretty much go in there. Now I'm going to have to work this a little bit. I've got one fold there where it's sitting down a little bit on the inside edge. So I've got a little bit of a difference in this shoulder here. But if I trim a little bit off the top, let that back corner sit where I want it to, and I can pull this edge down. I think that's going to just about work. Now this is pretty much the extent of the job. Getting everything to line up so that when you weld it, you're going to have the shape you want. So that back corner there fits very nice now. So I can get a spot of weld in there to just hold that. And then I'll get a couple more along here. And then we can bend this by clamping this outside edge. Bit of hot glue and we're just about going. Right, I'm just about ready to zap. You ready? Mm-hmm. that's lined the two edges up there. Not really worried about this piece down here at the moment. We can sort him out in a minute. About to weld. Safe. Weld. Weld. Safe. Now we want this corner down here to line up. So when we're at a car show, all the people who want to come and poke their head underneath the door will not see where we've been playing with it. So just weld. Now the shape of it has pulled this little corner here forward. So I'm just going to tap that back down to line it up with the other panel. We're high on both pieces. Doesn't want to play the game. Okay. Vice grips will pull it in. Get a little bit in the bottom corner. It's got the two pieces lined up through there. Okay, welding. Safe. This is a piece I folded and made myself, so there's a little discrepancy in the two folds, so it's just a little bit more room there, but I can shrink it down a bit like this just by hitting them together. So it's going to wind up with a little bit of stretch on this original piece, a little bit of shrinkage on the piece I've put in there, but either way we'll get it to sit flat and line up all the way through. That feels pretty good. So I'll just weld that piece all the way through now. Doing an uphill weld here. Uphill weld guarantees full penetration all the way because of the way the arc hits the panel. If we weld it downhill, it will be easier to achieve a weld, but the molten metal flows along underneath your arc and you can often have a nice looking weld that's got no penetration on the material underneath it. So I always use an uphill weld where I have the choice. And I've put a good bead of weld in that corner there because it's a hard spot to get a bit of penetration into, but by building it like that, it has guaranteed I've got weld all the way through my panel. Now we've got a little bit of a bulge. You might be able to see it if we look down from the top in here. I can shrink that in, so that's not really a problem. I can start by getting this piece in here to sit in right now, not worry about that, and we can come back and just shrink that with the hammer. So we'll see if we can get this corner to sit where we want it. And it looks like it's still a whisker long, so I'll peel it out and we'll get a bit of more cut off there. And it won't even matter if I've got a little bit of a gap here. So I'm going to just go a little bit more brutally on it this time. Look at that. That looks pretty good in there. Alrighty, that looks pretty nice. Now that's a hole for one of the clips to go in for the weather seal. So there's another one there, another one there. So I'll just weld either side of that and then we can make the hole out with a die grinder later on. That'll keep it in the right spot. Progress on the Kingswood. Now just tapping like that is shrinking this top edge. So it's coming in. We just want them to line up with the original, well, the piece we've made to the top there. But that could even come out a little bit looking at it. It might be a bit straight up and down. We'll go with it. A little bit under just in there. Yeah, it's just tucked in a bit. I don't know whether to, I think I'll pull it out. So something to get in behind there and lift it out with a bit to get the weld on the low spot. So you just lift it there and I can get this little area in here to line up. So that's what I want. So I'll get a spot of weld just in about there, I'd say. Right, a little bit of weld in there. And we're done. hitting down on the frame. Yeah, I can't get into the spot either. That bit there lines up now. I'll weld him. That's better. Stabilised it. That is so close. That lines up. That all lines up right. While this is cooling, I can work this area along this spot up here. I've got a little bit of a gap there. It's not going to be a problem. I'm just going to be a bit cautious welding it, because with an uphill weld, it'll want to burn hard. Okay, that's tied together. Now, this dog leg in here is a little bit deliberate because it adds great strength to the door because it spreads the weld over a wider area. So that's all going to work fine. Okay, one pass through there and it's all looking pretty good. Okay, I've got a little low spot. I'm going to try and lift up this top panel with a little screwdriver. Just get in there and bring that bottom edge out a little bit. If this breaks off, Chris the snap-on man, this was done by undoing a screw, not using this as a pry bar or a punch. Okay. No, it's just going to bend this bottom piece in. Pull it with a slide hammer. Okay, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I just want to lift this top piece out a little bit. And this is part of a stud welding system, but instead of getting the whole stud welder out to use that, I'm just going to spot this on with the MIG and then use the slide hammer to pull it out. There is a proper spot welder for welding those on with, and it's for pulling dents. So, that's better. So that's got the top pulled out. I think I'm going to pull the bottom a little bit too, because I think I bent it in a bit with the screwdriver. Now the piece below here, it's just a whisker low. Where I put the screwdriver in, or I bent it in a whisker. So we'll just put a zap in there and pull that piece out as well. That's pretty good. piece around the corner welded. And we've got another little low just in there that I can pull up. But I'll work a pass around here and get these all welded a bit more. I end my weld on the previous weld. Because your weld will be building in heat the further you travel with it, if you land on a weld, it'll make sure there's good penetration on the join. The vast majority of my welding is gas tight. Now, I'm not anticipating any great distortion here. I'm thinking it's all going to sit down and behave itself. It's going to need the dolly in behind it. A little bit awkward how I'm working at the moment. It's mainly just to get good camera angles. The sacrifices I make for everybody at home. That's nice. Now, because I had a bigger gap in there, I decided to just put one weld in the middle of it, and I've got two short pieces to come back and finish. That'll work pretty easily. Alright, the heat's got to me now. I just keep blowing the hole as I keep going, so it's walking it up slowly, but if I let it cool down, I'll be able to finish that easily. I'm welding with 0.6mm wire, as per usual, and an argon carbon dioxide blended gas. Just do this little piece in here, get him out the way, and then I'll weld that pin back on just into here and then pull this top section out just a tiny bit. It's got that corner done. We're only going to have to just grind off around that hole, and I'd say just get the die grinder into this bottom side there and just round it out a little bit, and the hole's going to be good enough. I don't think I'm the right way. Now, it doesn't really matter if I pull this out too far, because I can just tap it back down, but that looks pretty close to where we want it. We are out by a little bit. That'll So I'm looking forward to seeing this one ground up. I think it's going to come up nice. There we go, got it too hot, created a crater in there. It's no biggie though. Just let him cool down and come back and zap it up. Never get too worried about burning holes, guys. This is the tool for fixing them. So we just do them on the fly as we go. Right, so let's get my welds back in here. One about there. And one up above it. Same thing again, 8mm or 5/16 drill bit. And providing you drill into the piece underneath it, it gives you a bit of room for your weld to bite in. Join the two together. And one down here. Okay. So it's all sitting in where it needs to be. Righto, 3 welds. Okay. One more. You good? Okay, let's get that hole filled in. Just tap down some of our little curled up bits. That edge there. But that is our piece welded in there, ready to grind. So I can cut this frail off now. That's not doing anything anymore. We know our door has not changed dimension from this end to the other end because we've had the rail on it the whole time. We know that we're going to have an automatic straight edge along the bottom because we've had the rail welded to it. So I'm actually really looking forward to grinding this one up and getting it looking good. So I'm pretty happy that we've finally got a bit of work done on the old brown ute. Thanks guys, stay safe, we'll talk to you soon.